Brilliant. Oh, thank you for having me. And yes, today I'm going to focus on my research topic, which is ADHD, and all the different aspects on how it impacts daily life. So I will touch on a little bit about what is ADHD, the impact of having ADHD, and the impact of lack of diagnosis of ADHD, and then bringing back to the link with multiple disadvantages, and also highlighting a case study that I have, that I wanted to share with you. Sorry, I'm just realizing that by sharing my slides, I can't see the time, so I'm going to put my clock to make sure I'm on time. Right. So I always like to start any presentations that I do within this context with a bit of disclosure, and because I think it's really important to be transparent. I was diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood, and my own diagnosis allowed me to go to university because I always thought I was too stupid to learn. So I went back to uni in my 30s at the University of Reading, and then I did my PhD at the University of Nottingham. Both my children have got ADHD and autism. It runs in a family, so my whole family is neurodiverse. I'm a senior research fellow. I run different projects on ADHD, mainly around healthcare pathways, training for healthcare professionals, training for schools. And I also facilitate peer support group for parents and adults, so parents of children with neurodiversities and adults. So and I also lead the local Nottingham Neurodiversity Network. So when it comes to ADHD, it's my entire research background, but it's very hard to separate. I've got loads of different hats. I've been supporting families and adults for about 13 years. I do my research at the university that I'm really passionate about, and then I go home to my own neurodiverse family. So I don't know why I did that, but anyway. So yes, it means that when I talk about it, it's not just a straightforward answer about what this is, but the research shows they all my mixed experiences kind of does impact each other, and I think it's important to disclose that. So anyone that reads the news, there has been a lot of media. Sorry, I'll go back to that. Media coverage of ADHD. It's overdiagnosed. Everybody has ADHD. Lots of celebrities have come out with ADHD. A lot of misconceptions have been talked about when it comes to ADHD, and it's just very hard to not see it in our current social context. But I think through that shows that there's a lot more awareness on ADHD, which is great. But there's a lot of drawbacks on that as well. And right now, the ADHD care pathway is in crisis. The waiting lists are huge, whether you're a child or an adult. And there's kind of loads of consequences of this. One of them being there's a lot of stigmas around ADHD and misconceptions that keep being perpetrated through the media. So I just wanted to just touch base and see, like, okay, well, what actually is ADHD? So I've got a little quiz. So anyone that has a phone handy, I will give you, it's only 10 questions. So if you'd like to scan the QR code and answer those questions, trying to think about, what knowledge you have about ADHD, and see if we can start thinking about it from there. It shouldn't take long. It's only 10 minutes. It's only 10 questions. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes and then we'll go through it together. It's a good base to think about some misconceptions or stigmas you might have, and some of the actual knowledge, the representation you have about ADHD. I'm assuming everybody has scanned the code, so I'm just going to bring up the, can everybody see the no, you can't see the results now. Okay. All right, 2 minutes has gone past on my watch, so let's go through some of the results.
I was saying, I've just shared the link for anyone in the chat as well to the code. If
that's brilliant
to do that there.
We'll go through it question by question, so please feel free to carry on answering if you want to. That's absolutely fine. So I will go through in details, obviously, what exactly we mean by ADHD. I don't know why I can't go down this. Oh, there. So ADHD is caused by excessive sugar consumption. This is false, and I'm very glad that you all answered that. What we do know is that ADHD, the environment of how of your ADHD can impact the expression of symptoms, but it doesn't cause it. So ADHD is highly genetic, and the environment in which you grew up, the families in which you grew up, the places and so on, really can impact how much more you will struggle, but it never causes it. And I will go into details of that a little bit more after that. Children or adults, children who take medication, ADHD medication, are more likely to abuse drugs. So there is a lot of stigmas around medication because of the name. It's a stimulant medication. They're controlled medications. They're very similar in chemistry to a lot of illegal drugs. And one of the misconceptions around it is that you are more likely to abuse drugs when you take it because you're giving children very strong controlled drugs that will lead for them to take it later on in life. Now, substance abuse is highly linked with ADHD, but highly linked with undiagnosed and unsupported ADHD. What we do know, the many studies that have been done in children and ADHD medication, is that it actually prevents further substance abuse to develop. By managing the ADHD, by managing the symptoms and controlling, being able to manage how you deal with it, you are less likely to abuse drugs than if you don't. So not only are you not more likely to abuse drugs later on if you take medication, it actually prevents any further addiction later on in life. ADHD is predominantly a genetic disorder, is highly hereditary. So I don't know how everybody is linked with ADHD in terms of work or, but I mean, it's extremely rare. I mean, I've never seen that. If you have a child or an adult with ADHD, there is not another family members that will have ADHD or other neurodiversities, neurodevelopmental conditions. So when I work with school, I always suggest the teacher to look at siblings, to look at parents. When we work with adults, again, to look at, their siblings, their parents, their cousin. There will always be a link, a family link, where someone else in the family has some form of impairment and difficulties. And this is really important when we think, so for example, if we think about schools, if you have a parent with ADHD, with a child with ADHD, the strategies you're going to implement, the way you're going to support them is very different because the parents have their own struggles. Oops. So I'm not very good with the laptop and scrolling. People with ADHD often struggle to accurately estimate time. Yeah, that is true. It's known as time blindness. And the way it impacts people is, they don't really know how long tasks take. So that it's just very hard to estimate, how long it takes to do the washing up or how long it takes to pay a bill. But also how long it will take to get started and finish a task, bigger tasks like work tasks. But also, for example, in a school setting or in a work setting, if you have a meeting 9 to 10 and then a meeting between 11 and 12, just not understanding that 1 hour, what can and cannot be done, and just leading to just a lot of frustration and procrastination. So there's a lot of different ways this comes across, but it's extremely common. Sorry, I am really not good with that. Where are we? ADHD is the result of poor parenting. Again, well done for all answering that. This is false. So as I mentioned, environment and parenting can affect the expression of symptoms of ADHD, but it doesn't cause them. So just to give you an example about how the environment and parenting can shape ADHD, you have 2 little boys who have the same impairments, the same symptoms, the same ADHD, if there's such things. They're both the same age, and they have similar struggles. But one of them grows up in a semi-detached house with a garden and a trampoline. So when he comes back from school, he can go outside and release all his extra pent-up energy. He has a mum that is there in the evening, can support him through doing his homework, can help him remember his homework, and he sleeps okay because he has it in his own room, and his parents have just put a lot of things in place to make sure that his sleep is not disturbed. And you have the same little boy who grows up in a flat, maybe sharing a room with siblings, with parents that can be separated or work shifts. There is no garden to release the energy when you come back from school. There's no parks around. It's a very small environment. The parents are now here to support with reminding them about homework, reminding them or sitting with them to do it. Because they share a room with a sibling, then the sibling keeps waking up and the sleep is very disturbed. Now, I'm sure you can see how these 2 children with very similar difficulties will have very different expression of symptoms at school the next day or at home. The environment and the parenting is not, not the parenting. The environment is just not ideal to support the needs of this child. And this is nothing to do with parenting. It's just due to circumstances. But that second child will struggle a lot more than that first child with the same impairments, if that makes sense. And this is how it can be misconstrued as bad parenting, or as some people have told me, it's just a lower class condition that it's not. Research studies do show that the brains of individuals with or without ADHD are different, mainly in the way neurotransmitters are being conducted through the brain, noradrenaline and dopamine. Dopamine is your reward system, and basically it has been shown time and time again that the dopamine neuron pathways, it just doesn't work. So you don't have the same amount of dopamine going through your brain when you need to make decisions, when you need to, for executive functions, and so on. And this is how ADHD is something you're born with. Your brain works differently than an atypical brain. ADHD occurs in both boys and girls. Well done. The ratio in childhood is 1 to 4, and in adulthood, it seems to be going 50-50. Now, there's a lot of newer research really highlighting the fact that now we don't think that it's just much more boys than girls. It's just there's many different ways of thinking about it. One is that girls don't get picked up as much. They mask a lot more. Their difficulties are not as obvious because they might not be as disruptive, or their behavior might not be as challenging as some of the ones that boys can display. And usually girls tend to manage kind of okay until teenage years, until 18, and then they go to university, they start relationship, they start a job, and then they crash because they've been really struggling for so many years, but kind of getting by. And then they really struggle in adulthood, which is why we tend to see a lot more girls coming through in adulthood. It's not because girls get ADHD in adulthood, it's just because they tend to to be missed in childhood. And adding to that, a lot of the ADHD measures that we think about are really aimed at the hyperactivity side of ADHD, which is mainly seen in boys, and girls tend to be inattentive. Now, it's not exclusive. You can have hyperactive girls and inattentive boys, but really, when we think about the criteria that we look at when we think about ADHD, it's mainly trying to pick up the hyperactivity, which girls tend in general to have less of. People with ADHD do struggle to make and retain friends. There's a lot of impact of social pressure and not understanding social demands. And actually, when I've worked with families, when I've worked with young children, and to be fair, when I've worked with adults as well, these tend to be the things that bothers the individuals a lot more than the inattention, for example. Okay, if you ask a 10-year-old, does it bother you to keep forgetting your homework or struggling with paying attention in class? They don't care about that. But what they do care about is that they don't get invited to birthday parties and they don't get picked when the football team is being set up. And it has huge impact on mental well-being, huge impact of confidence and self-esteem. And it's a mixture of being really impulsive, behavior that's a bit different, but also just not really understanding the parameters of social demands, what you can and cannot say. When is it okay to do that? When is it not okay to do that? And just really, for example, if you think about impulsivity, a child might interrupt the class to say something funny, and it is actually really funny and everybody laughs. But then the next day, he says something that is not as funny or can be hurtful or can be seen tactless, and then nobody laughs. And it doesn't really understand what the difference is between those two situations because he behaved the same, but the reaction was very different. ADHD is not something you grow out of with the right treatment. Many studies had shown that 80% or 60% of children would carry on having issues into adulthood, but newer research has shown that actually it's not something that goes away. You don't just get rid of your ADHD. What happens and what studies have failed to capture before is that you will have medication, treatment, support can help you manage, and help you manage until a certain point. Now, some people are very lucky that they will always have a support system, whether it's their families, their wives, their friends, and somehow they might manage for a very long time. But what we do know now is that any big life event will make everything unravel. So whether it's a death of a family member, a divorce, losing your job, moving house, any ways that implies that some form of support or system will be weaker, often leads to actually all your ADHD struggles coming back, usually unexpected if you've been managing for a long time. And finally, stimulant medication will make individuals less hyperactive. So the way I tend to explain it is that, I don't know if you can see me at all in a video, but you have X amount of, a typical brain will work on X amount of dopamine. I'm making up numbers and I'm making up, thresholds, but the ADHD brain has a lot less. So let's say you have 10 dopamines. I don't know, that doesn't make any sense, and the ADHD brain has 5. When you take stimulant medication, the ADHD brain has 10. So this brain would be on par with an atypical brain. And what that means that all the inattention, the hyperfocus, all of a sudden you can calm down, you can pay attention, you are more in control of what you do, because you have the right level of neurotransmitters to give you the ability to make these decisions and to act like that. But when a typical brain takes stimulant medication, then their dopamine goes from 10 to 15. And this is where a person might be very hyper, very high, very similar to class A drugs. So that misconception, the effect it has on a typical brain makes people believe that stimulant medication will stimulate you, give you more energy, makes you very, very high. It doesn't, because the ADHD brain is already so deficient. So I don't know if that makes sense, and I don't know if I explained it correctly, but it's just to understand why these kind of misconceptions are quite strong, and but how the medication supports ADHD. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. Sorry, struggling with technicalities. Can you all see that? If you can't, I'm assuming someone will tell me.
Yep.
All right. Brilliant. Thank you. So let's go back to the basics. I know we've talked about loads of different details, but I think it's quite a nice way to start thinking about ADHD. So ADHD happens in 3 to 5% of children and adults. So that's at least one child in every classroom. And I've just realized that in that cup on my slide, we are missing one symptom. So that's not very, very good. So it has 3 core symptoms: hyperactivity, inattention, and impulsivity. And people can be diagnosed with a hyperactive type, which tend to be seen more in boys, and inattentive types, which tends to be seen more in girls, or combined types, which is a mixture of the two. It affects both boys and girls, and it's highly genetic. There's lots of brain differences that impact executive functions, and there's also a lot of co-occurring disorders. So having ADHD alone is the exception rather than the norm. Usually it's, especially in adulthood, you will see a lot of mental health difficulty, anxiety, depression. This is usually a consequence of having unsupported or having ADHD. But you also have a lot of co-occurring conditions such as dyspraxia or autism or Tourette's. So I didn't put this slide, but 30% of people with ADHD will have ADHD alone. Usually you will have another developmental condition with it. Yeah. So again, something to bear in mind when we think about ADHD. It usually comes with other things. It can be treated with pharmacological and non-pharmacological interventions. So the way I try to explain ADHD is that it's a different way of thinking and working. You react differently to situation. You think differently about solutions. Your response to things is different, and it has an impact on everything: your social lives, your work, your education, your health, your mental well-being, your family, your relationships, everything. And it's not just the inattention, it's not just the hyperactivity, it's just a condition that impacts every single aspect of your life. And the way I try to explain it, when it's like if you live in a, try to imagine you live in a world where everybody's playing the same game and you don't understand the rules and you don't know the rules. And sometimes you make a move and you win, and sometimes you make a move and you lose. And you haven't got a clue what those rules are, but everybody else seems to. And it's a lot of the adults I've worked with, we used to use this kind of metaphor to make people understand that what it's like to live with ADHD, what it's like to live in a world where you just don't get it, and you don't really know what works and what doesn't, and you make guesses, and sometimes they're the right guesses, and sometimes they're not, and it's just very hard to understand what the differences are. So for example, I'll give you an example that or how it affects me. I'm quite literal, I'm quite black and white. So if someone asks me at work how I am, I'm currently going through a divorce. And if I'm having a bad day, I would say, "Oh, hi, Blondine, you're right." I'll be like, "Yeah, no, I'm not having a good day. Like, the divorce is being hard on me and the kids and blah, blah." And I know that people don't expect that answer, especially people you don't know that well. My friends maybe, but not people at work. But I can never bring myself to say, "Yeah, I'm fine." Because I always think, what if I say, "Yeah, I'm fine," I'm lying. I'm not fine. I'm having a really hard time. And I'm thinking, well, if you don't want to know the truth, don't ask the question. If you don't want to know how I am, don't ask the question. But I do know that the expected answer is, yes, I'm fine. But that's a lie, and it doesn't sit well with me. But saying the other thing, saying exactly how I am, is not socially acceptable. And I'm always struggling with the decision of whether I should lie or whether I should follow what I really want to say, thinking that whatever they ask, therefore they care. And this is an example about all these rules, these social rules, these rules within society, within workplaces. I mean, this is a very minor example, but that you just don't really understand, and you don't know how it's going to be taken. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. So some of the way that relationship and social situations are affected by ADHD is, the impulsivity. It can come across as having no filter, are being tactless. And again, it's not people have no filter, it's just they said the first thing that comes into their mind. It comes with a lot of emotional responses. So you will find usually that people with ADHD have got very strong emotions, very strong reactions to situations. There's a lot of masking. Now, I'm assuming most people know, but just in case someone doesn't know the concept of masking, it's a term often used with autism, but actually it works with all neurodevelopmental conditions around behaving a certain way, in a way that is expected of you at school, when this way is not, is hiding what, it's just hiding what you really want to do. A little bit like what I just said about it. For me, masking would have been like, "Oh yes, I'm fine, how are you?" That would be masking, because I would be behaving in a way that's expected, but not behaving in a way that feels right for me. So a lot of girls especially tend to mask a lot, and they spend the whole day at school, the whole day at work, just behaving in a way that they think is demanded of them, and it creates a lot of emotional difficulties. You can't always stop your impulsivity. You can't, or your behavior, it just seems out of control of you. You can't read situations. You don't really know if it's going to be okay to act like that or not. If people are going to be accepting of your reactions or your difficulties, or you just full stop. And you can't function if you're unprepared. So one of the many difficulties socially is being in a situation that you're not expected. So all of a sudden you thought you were going to have a meeting with just 5 of your colleagues, and then the whole, I don't know, area board is there, and you were not prepared for that. It's very difficult to just adapt your difficulties in this new social situation that you were not pre-warned. So a lot of support that we give with adults, for example, in interviews, is to give questions in advance to really warn people about, okay, well, so when you go to this meeting, there's going to be that many people, and these people are going to be here. So just so you know, so there's no surprises, and you can really think about what that means. And yes, not understanding social rules. Just again, these are not. This is not everyone with ADHD doesn't understand social rules, but it's just some of the difficulties that might be seen when you have ADHD. In terms of work and education challenges, you're always questioning things. You're always doubting whether what you're doing is the right way or not. So people with ADHD tend to be amazing at thinking outside the box, which is a great skill and a great quality. But sometimes in some situation, in some work, you have to follow the rules. You can't just think outside the box, and you can't just find different solutions and on questioning whether that works or not. ADHD is not so much an issue with inattention, but an issue with not controlling your attention. So you can just lose your attention and you have no control over that, or you can hyperfocus as well. So you might see someone just be on the same task for 3 hours, and the hyperfocus is there, but it's just a matter of not controlling it. So I can't tell you in advance whether tomorrow morning I can do a 3-hour meeting or not. It will be in my diary and I will turn up, and maybe I'll be able to focus and get on with it. And maybe I have one of those days when you just can't get your focus back. And once it's gone, it's gone. And you can't choose. So that concept of not being able to be in control of of your attention is very difficult, because it's not a matter of will, it's a matter of you generally can't. So when you have people who have big, I don't know, a very important meeting to run, or tasks that are very important at a very specific time, if you're not in that space when you can focus, it can be really detrimental. Often comes with miscommunications, again, with the impulsivity, with the hyperactivity, which is the understanding the boundary. Time blindness, we mentioned, which leads to procrastination, not understanding how to manage workloads, a lot of disorganizations, difficulty with changes, which we have said, and sensory overload. Again, for those who don't know the concept, so sensory processing issues are very common with all neurodevelopmental conditions. And it's just a heightened impact of heightened senses. So you could be in a room that's very bright, and just the light just will make you lose focus. The feel of certain clothes, whether you can feel the label on your clothes, whether you're too hot or you're too cold, whether there's noise going around or whether there's not enough noise going around. There's a lot of sensory input that can make the difference between a good day at work or not. I personally can't work in an open space. Having all these distracting noises will always take my attention away from what I'm supposed to do. And it's fine if you know that and you are in a place that can work around that, but it's just part of the understanding about what you can and cannot do. So different environments, life event situation will strongly affect how well you can cope. So ADHD is not linear, and this is what I started to explain with the childhood to adulthood. Many things can happen that will change completely your whole way of coping with ADHD. And that's something very important to remember, because you might have a child that does very well. And I've met parents who have said, oh, little Charlie is fine. He's doing well, And I keep saying, yes, but there'll be one day when you're not going to be there to support him, where he's not going to have this network that really, really supports his challenges. And then he's going to come crashing down. And that's life, but you need to be prepared for it. When I used to give a similar presentation 3 years ago, I was like, great, I got my diagnosis, I went back to uni, I got my family, everything was fine. And then my father passed away and everything came crashing down. And everything I believed about, you just need to learn to manage it, you put strategies in place, and then it becomes more and more manageable and it becomes okay, went out the window. And so whether it's a child or an adult, I think there's a big danger in being complacent and thinking, oh, they're managing, they've figured it out, because it doesn't take much to change it all. And it's not linear. It's not you just get better and better. It will come and go, and different life situations, life events will change that. So ADHD has those 3 key criteria, so symptoms. But there's a lot of things that comes with having ADHD that are not part of the diagnostic criteria. And whether when I work with adults or children, what I'm finding is that those other things are the things that impact people the most. So poor memory, for difficulties with sleep. So sleep is a major issue. About 50 to 60% of people with ADHD have issues with sleep. And you can understand how if you don't sleep well, you keep waking up, it takes you 3 hours to go to sleep. That has a knock-on effect of how well you can do the next day. You can be, well, you can do your work, your school. Emotional reactivity, sensory processing issues, and usually in adulthood or in teenage and adulthood, very strong mental health difficulties, anxiety, depression, substance abuse. So as I said with the children, when you ask a child, they don't really care about their poor memory. A child doesn't care that he forgot his homework at work. I mean, he will care if he gets punished, but the social impact of having ADHD really is what bothers them. In adults, it's the same. Is it's all these other things, the anxiety, depression. Usually, the mental health difficulties are a lot worse than the inattention. And ADHD is not one size fits all. So, I mean, all neurodevelopmental conditions are not one size fits all. Most people will be clumsy or have sensory issues, but not all of them. Most girls will mask, but not all of them. So when you think about, all these different impact, the sensory processing difficulty, the sleep issues, the memory issues, the masking, the perfectionism, all these things that comes with ADHD, and you've got a matrix of 20 different, I'm making that up, but you will have a mix of difficulty that range within these. I know some people with ADHD that sleep very well, but there will always be a mixture of that, and it's thinking about what does it do to the individual and how well they're managing and what actually they're struggling with. And parenting with ADHD is very hard because usually parenting children with very similar difficulties than you, and it's just not an easy thing. So just really thinking about the context and the environment in which people are, how they are effective, really is the only way to get a good picture of what does it mean to have ADHD for that specific individual. So we know that ADHD, that again, years of research has been linked to higher rates of depression, early pregnancy, unwanted pregnancies, accidents, addictions, divorce. There are many different things that are linked with having ADHD, and I published this umbrella review last year when we looked at everything that was published on ADHD around the associated risks, and we separated in 3 different categories: physical health, mental health, and other impacts. So the studies on prisons, for example, the lowest study that I've found was 25%. 25 to 43% of people in prison have undiagnosed ADHD. The rate of criminality, violence is really high. The main 2 impacts is prison and substance abuse. When we look at this specific population, again, with the substance abuse clinic, some studies showed as high as 68% of people in those clinics had screened positive for ADHD. So we're very likely to have undiagnosed ADHD. Risky sexual behavior, risky behavior in driving and accident, mental health issues, and issues with teeth and sleep, and other sides of other physical health issues like obesity or eating disorders. So the reason I always make sure I include this is not to scare people off. If you have ADHD, you're not 44% of people with ADHD end up in prison. There's a very strong element, there's a very strong nuance in all these statistics, is that a lot of these are worsened when it's not diagnosed and not supported. early support management strategies really stop a lot of these things happening. And it doesn't mean that everyone, you're just doomed and you're having all these horrible things that are going to happen in life. But it also doesn't mean that ADHD is just this, oh, well, everybody has ADHD, you're just a bit inattentive and you're just a bit forgetful. I think that's one of the strong misconceptions, that it's just a condition that is not life-threatening. It's not, and it's not by itself. But we don't know that you're 3 times more likely to die by suicide if you have ADHD than if you do not. There's a lot of impacts that are important to consider, and it's not just a small condition, that you should disregard easily. This is why I always make sure I include a slide on this to kind of dispel some of those beliefs. Well, I did add a slide. So this is a slide with the comorbidities. So if you see at the top, if you have ADHD, the chances of having autism, DCDs, dyspraxia, learning difficulties, dyscalculia, dyslexia, this shows all the overlap between the different neurodevelopmental conditions. So I've started saying, obviously all these other undiagnosed ADHD leads to much worse outcomes. And a lot of these outcomes are I've just mentioned. So this is the project I'm currently working on. I'm on a fellowship looking at the economic cost of undiagnosed ADHD and autism. And this is really the main thing. So there's not a lot published. There's not a lot of research on this. But you are at increased risk of depression and anxiety and suicide, alcohol abuse, lower academic attainment, lower quality of life, and unemployment, significant higher risk of offending and imprisonment, and risk of injury, and social difficulty and divorce. So that's what the research has shown. And this costs billions to the healthcare system, but also to the social services. I mean, if we think about the prison system, the impact of unsupported, if let's say if we were being conservative and said 25% of the prison population has unsupported and undiagnosed ADHD, what could happen if we were to support these people and in terms of economic costs, but also individual costs and societal costs. So these are all the different risks that I just presented before. One of the one I didn't mention, it's a study I really like because it's a very unbiased study. One of them was they went to an A&E setting, and actually I think it was done in Nottingham, where they looked at the number of children between the age of, I can't remember, 7 and 12 maybe, coming through an A&E over a week. And children with appendicitis and children with accidental injuries. In the appendicitis group, I can't remember how many children, let's say 200 children, the normal 3 to 5%, when they screen for ADHD, 3 to 5% of these children met criteria for ADHD. But in the accidental injury group, 68% met criteria for undiagnosed ADHD. So the A&E is full of accidental injury from undiagnosed, unsupported children. And when you think about the impulsivity, the risk-taking behavior, the hyperactivity, all that combines leads to a lot of negative outcomes. So I did an interview, a qualitative study. I interviewed adult patients about their experience of having a late diagnosis of ADHD or autism. And these are the themes that came through, and I thought I was quite interested to highlight in terms of the impact of lack of diagnosis. The impact it's had on relationship. I mean, a lot of women talked about how they just felt that they were just not good enough because they just couldn't function in a way that was expected of them. The impact of mental health. Everybody that I interviewed had some form of mental health difficulty throughout their life. The benefits of understanding, but also the flip side of, the timing. Not everybody is ready to have a diagnosis of ADHD, and timing is quite important. It's a small proportion, but there is a proportion of people that are not ready to accept it. But also the burden of the label of autism or ADHD. When we talked about negatives, the negatives were not from having ADHD, but they were mainly from the impact, the societal views of ADHD or autism, and how people reacted to that diagnosis, how people reacted to that label. So right now, I'm conducting an economic evaluation. We are comparing 3 different groups, group of people diagnosed in childhood, adults diagnosed in adulthood, and undiagnosed adults, to see the strong economic impact of lack of diagnosis and what does it mean for individuals, for society, for healthcare services. So, links with multiple disadvantages. So let's recap a little bit and think about what ADHD is. So we're talking about impulsivity, hyperactivity, and attention. There's a lot of personal and emotional instabilities, very strong difficulties in managing emotions, executive dysfunctions, so control inhibition, which is linked with impulsivity, and a lot of reward-seeking behavior. So we know, for example, some of the strategies we put in place when we work with families is quick reward, quick responses. I'm really sorry, I've got someone at my front door. Is that okay if I go quickly? Sorry, 2 seconds.
That's okay. That's fine.
I'm sorry, you wouldn't believe this, but I just opened my windows and there was a cat at my doorstep. I don't think it's the cat that rang the doorbell, but that was quite a surprise. There's a parcel and a cat next to it. Anyway, I can deal with that later. So yes, reward seeking, the behavior of ADHD is, so quick rewards, praises works very well with children and adults, but you constantly seek that dopamine hit. Which is why a lot of the behavior that we've seen happen. And it leads to careless mistakes. It leads to, losing your job, losing your home, not remembering to pay bills, failed relationship, whether we're talking about relationship with your families, of your friends, or romantic relationships. So it has an impact on everything. And I just wanted to unpick it a little bit more, just to think about what it means when you combine all these things together. So when we think about homelessness, so I've put all the references for this at the notes of the slide if you want to have a look. So we know that childhood ADHD is associated with an elevated rate of homelessness in adulthood. The rate is between 8 and 24%, depending on the studies that you look at. And the risk factor were usually linked with elevated substance abuse, school dropouts, and coexisting mood and personality disorders. So we didn't talk much about school dropouts and education, but when we think about the behavior that can be associated with it, and I've worked with lots of young adults who can't stand still in class, can't sit still, can't, and get told off all the time that they get up, they make a noise, they start talking. And then this constant loop of getting told off, getting asked to leave the classroom, then eventually after X amount of time, just getting, sorry, what's the term I'm looking for? Expelled from the school. And then the behavior often leads to the behaviors can lead to school exclusion or leaving school too early, feeling like you're stupid, you can't learn, whatever. I mean, there's a very high level of school dropout or lack of education attainment in this population. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean straight to homelessness, but it's just one of the links that we know happens. And in the samples where they have looked at undiagnosed ADHD in homeless people, 42 to 64% were the rates from the studies. Now, if we think about criminal justice, I mean, the prison population ratings are extremely high. There's one person, Susan Young, who spent a whole career looking at that. It is definitely one of the main issues. People with ADHD tend to be involved with the criminal system at a younger age. They have higher rates of recidivism, more likely to make false confessions, and higher risk of critical incidents. And they're 2.2 times more likely to be arrested, convicted, and incarcerated. So there's definitely a strong need for accommodation. What I don't know, and I couldn't really find out now, so we know, and I will talk about it afterwards, that there is a strong link between substance abuse and ADHD. Now, especially with cannabis. So cannabis and class A drugs like cocaine have a very similar effect than the ADHD medication on the brain. So I personally know a lot of people with ADHD who take cannabis as, self-medication, because it gives them that calmness, that ability to just not have a whole of things going at once in their brain that they can't get any other way. And what I'm curious, and I couldn't find in my quick search, is the link with, how much of the criminal justice and issues with criminality are linked with potential either buying drugs or taking drugs, or is it just, and I don't know that. But I think there's definitely a link in that in terms of the experiences I've seen in adults I've worked with. Domestic abuse, so a higher risk of children abuse, and this comes with some behavior that could be deemed difficult if ADHD does not manage. Parents having expectation of how a child should behave, or if they keep getting in trouble at school, just being very strict, but also your own parental ADHD. So if you're struggling with so many things and your child is struggling, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing. It's just very hard to manage this in a family environment. Higher risk of childhood trauma, higher risk of interpersonal violence as a perpetrator or victim, and high risk of sexual violence, again, as a perpetrator or victim. And we do know that there's general lower self-esteem in all adults with ADHD, but especially in women. This struck me a lot. I've worked with adults for a very long time, but when I was doing the interviews, I always remember this one person who, she kept saying, I just felt like I wasn't good at being a human. And this led, I'm sure you can see the lower self-esteem led to her getting into relationships that were not healthy for her, not standing up for herself, not opening up, not just being generally badly treated by her partners. So substance abuse, I've mentioned it a lot, the concept of self-medication, especially with cannabis or alcohol. 25% of adults with ADHD have substance misuse, 20 to 43% of inpatients meet the ADHD criteria. Actually, I forgot that one study when it was 68%. Children with ADHD have twice at risk of developing addictions. Adolescent show early onset of substance abuse, greater misuse, severity, and chronicity, and addictions that keeps changing. So what we see in teenagers especially is that it often starts from peer pressure. They spend their childhood not fitting in, not being liked, not being the cool kid. And then all of a sudden someone says, do you want to try a cigarette? Do you want to try this? And they do. And because they want to fit in. But then they find out, oh, hang on, when I smoke a joint, my brain is a lot calmer. I'm acting a lot better. I like that. And then it starts on. And what we see as well is that the addictions keep changing. You might start with cigarettes, then move on to cannabis, then move on to alcohol, or in any other way. Poor mental health, again, with substance abuse, this is the highest link with ADHD, with 50% comorbidity, high risk of suicide, OCD, bipolar, anxiety, depression, eating disorder, psychotic disorder. Having mental health difficulties with ADHD is the norm rather than the exception. And usually what you will see in undiagnosed adults is that they will have a history of mental health issues. So when you look at their patient's record or their GP records, they will have been in and out of antidepressant, taking them all the time. And lots of depressive episodes before then they realize that there's more to it with the undiagnosed ADHD. But I am yet to meet an adult that has not struggled with mental health difficulties with ADHD in their lifetime. It's usually the highest impact. So to keep in mind, ADHD has lots of worsen outcomes that are worsen when they're untreated and unsupported. Think about comorbidities and what goes with it. It's not a linear condition. You don't get it and then you get treatment and it gets better and better and better, and then you grow out of it. It's a very messy pathway. It's a very messy condition that has loads of different impacts, and the impacts keep changing. When you go from childhood to adolescence, from adolescence to adulthood, it will impact your life differently. And impact everybody else. It impacts your family, your partners, your environment, your friends. I mean, we were asked, I am part of the National ADHD Task Force for NHS England, and we were asked to estimate how many people are affected by ADHD. Not how many people have ADHD but are affected. And when you start thinking about the impact on the parents, the friends, the teachers, everyone else, it's a really high number. And all these multiple disadvantages are linked with ADHD behavior. The way, your impulsivity, how you might take drugs just because you are around it, or yeah. So I just before I finish, just another couple of minutes, I think I'm on time. I just wanted to tell you about a case study of a person that I know, and I've asked permission to share this. This is not their pictures, but because for me, that really explained the link with ADHD and multiple disadvantages. So we're going to talk about Lloyd, who was a friend of mine, and Lloyd had 4 out of the 5 multiple disadvantages that we think about. He had poor mental health, substance use, misuse, criminality, and job or house insecurity. So I met Lloyd when we were both 29 and going to uni. So when I went back to uni, we were both mature students, and we started uni at the same time, although he was doing a different course than me. And we both started working at the same time in a restaurant to support our studies. I was very open about my ADHD, and Lloyd had told me about his unsupported ADHD as well. He had a diagnosis as a child, but he was not seeking any help for it. Lloyd is very impulsive and hyperactive, a lot of energy, very, very charismatic. He had piercings everywhere, tattoos everywhere, and just his energy was just shining through when we worked in a restaurant and he was behind the bar. So a few things happened. We started working together, and when we had our 3 months probation, we passed probation, so we kept on, this job to carry on throughout our degree. I always remember that day Lloyd went to celebrate that he passed probation because he had tattoos and piercing and he looked a bit different. He found it quite hard. I mean, this is what he told me, to find jobs in social settings. So he was very happy to have passed probation for this job. He went to sit outside. It was in the summer with some friends. He had a few drinks. It was the afternoon, and Lloyd was very impulsive and just talked about loads of things that maybe you shouldn't talk in public, especially about his sexual practices. he was very open about it, laughing about it. And the waitress that kept serving him, obviously we worked with her, he was making some comments that were not really inappropriate. She wasn't bothered, but might look to the outside as inappropriate. So his celebration led to the table next to him making a complaint to head office, a really long complaint about the topics he was discussing in the middle of the afternoon, the way he was talking to the waitress, and how this was a family restaurant, and they did not appreciate overhearing these kind of things. And because Lloyd was very loud, you couldn't help but be drawn by what he was saying. Anyway, he was fired because of that. So the one conversation led to him losing his job, and he was devastated because he loved his job. I stayed with him throughout university, and there was another occasion where he had a girlfriend, and for a while, and then they split up. And I always remember meeting him outside, coming out of a lecture, knowing there was 250 people on my course and about 100 on his course, and we both came out of lecture, and he saw me, and he ran towards me, and he cried like I've never seen an adult cry that much, very big, sobbing, and telling me all about how he broke up with this girl. And I remember everybody staring at us. Now, I don't care. It didn't bother me. But I remember thinking people were not comfortable with that. The same way people were not comfortable with his behavior at the restaurant. People were not comfortable with him being so emotionally open, crying openly in public. We went to sit down in a cafe and it was full, and he didn't try to hide it, and didn't try to be, he was just obviously sobbing. And I remember thinking, this is why we struggle with friendship. People don't like that. You're not supposed to cry in public. You're not supposed to behave in those ways. And it pushes people away. It makes people a bit wary of you, and people are just not that. Yeah. Alongside that, Lloyd was self-medicating with cannabis and class A drugs. He was taking lots of risks in sexual behavior. And then finally, just before I finish off, he met someone. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within 8 months, they were married. She lived a few hundred miles away in Liverpool, I think she lived. So he left university at the end of his second year to go to Liverpool with her because she was the love of his life. He left all his friends. He didn't have a job. He moved in with her. He left his mum and sister there. He left his course. And I remember saying to him, Lloyd, if she's the one for you, she will wait 1 more year, finish your uni, you finish your degree, finish it off, and then you go and move to Liverpool. But no, he had to act right now, right there. Anyway, within 4 months, the marriage broke down. This led to him coming back to Reading, being very down and attempting suicide twice. And unfortunately, the second time he succeeded. And he passed away at, I think it was 31 by that time. Now, when we think about the link of ADHD and multiple disadvantages, like I saw that it was like watching a movie. I saw all the behavior that Lloyd was struggling with and how this led to, the lack of friendships, the self-medication, the risky behavior, the impulsivity that led him to quit his course where he was excellent at, to lose his job that he was really good at, to leave all his friends and remove his support circle without understanding that, and betting it all on something that was very uncertain, and that led to him just not coping. And every time I think about all the things we talk about, I think about Lloyd. I did ask his mum if I was okay to share his story, and she obviously said yes. But there were so many steps in the 3 years that I knew him that led to where he ended, and could have led to so many other things that in my head I clearly see as directly linked with ADHD behavior. That for me explains a lot about how you end up there, and how it is so linked with everything we've talked about. Now, I won't take you any longer. Sorry, I am a bit over time, but we have time for questions afterwards. I'm very aware that I've talked a lot about negative things, and there's a reason for that, because I do want to make the point that ADHD is not something to take lightly. It does affect people very strongly. However, I still think it's important to finish on a positive note. Now, living with ADHD is like being a fish, and being asked to climb a tree. I love this saying because for me that describes exactly what it's like to live with ADHD. There's nothing wrong with being a fish. It's just very difficult to be a fish in a world where you're being asked to climb a tree. And there's a lot of benefits that comes with it. And for me, recognizing and encouraging strength, you will always find strength in people with ADHD, whether they think outside the box, whether they are really good at sports or, whatever. Usually there's a lot of positive things have been associated. I mean, a lot of very famous people have ADHD. You have your Richard Bransons or your Michael Phelps or your athletes, your Tim Burton. I mean, I think Tim Burton is a perfect example because I'm sure he grew up and everybody thought he was very weird and a bit out there and it is strange, but you know what? He's excellent at it. And his way might be different, but it brought him a lot of success. So recognizing and encouraging strengths, thinking about how to reframe the positive around ADHD is very important. ADHD is not a superpower. I will never say that, but it's just the balance between thinking about the difficulties and encouraging the strength. And that's me.
Oh, thank you, Blandine. That was really interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us. We've got quite a few questions to put to you as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry, Justine. I thought I would have plenty of time, and I went a bit over time, but I'm not in a rush to leave after that.
No, that's fine. That's fine. We've still got plenty of time for questions. So yeah, it's all good. So the first question that's been asked is so this was in relation to the test where the question was about stimulant medication and making individuals less hyperactive towards the beginning of your presentation, and it's asking, is this why someone will self-medicate with amphetamine?
Yeah, it calms you down, it calms your brain down. It makes you able to focus. It makes you able to, and I know it seems like a contradiction because of the term stimulant, but it does. And amphetamine is so the chemistry of the ADHD medication is very similar to cocaine and speed. So it is amphetamines. I mean, it's called dexamphetamine. There are amphetamines. It's just the proportion and the way that they're formulated is very different and made in a controlled way. But yeah, basically there are amphetamines, and this is why you will seek illegal amphetamines if you can't get them the legal way through medication.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, it says, do you have any tips for people who need to ask for reasonable adjustments and understanding in the workplace?
Yes. I've got one tip because it's very hard. Every single person with ADHD is different. Just the same when if you think about depression, every single person with depression is different. Some people will be very funny and just pretend that nothing has happened. Some people will be in bed all day. You can't just say, well, someone with depression needs this. So it's the same with ADHD. I can't tell you need to do this because it depends on their expression of system, their range of symptoms, and what they struggle with. But what I can tell you, and this is what when I work with adults, what we do all the time, is you need to identify your difficulties, and only the person with ADHD can do that, not your boss. Your boss cannot see if you struggle with disorganization or timekeeping. I mean, some things might be obvious, but what do you struggle with the most? What does this person struggle with the most? Is it procrastination? Is it time management? Is it disorganization? Is it social situation? Is it working in an open space? Is it meeting deadlines? Whatever. There will be a combination of struggles that they have, and really thinking with them or separately about what does ADHD mean in the workplace, and from then putting things in place. So if they struggle with an open space, can they work from home? Can they have their own office? If they struggle with organization, can we support them with whatever system? Or if they struggle to remember a deadline, can we set up a reminder system that just prompt them? If they can't remember tasks after a meeting, make sure they write them down. So get into a habit of writing everything down. All these things can be put in place. There's loads of strategies about how to increase, how to support these difficulties. But there's no point of me giving them to you without, because these people might not be. I'm an excellent timekeeper. I'm never late, ever. So putting timekeeping strategies for me in place wouldn't work, right? So it's just really understanding, what does it mean? What does the autism mean for you? And also thinking that this person with ADHD might be dyslexic, might be dyspraxic, might have autism as well. So it's not just the ADHD. Is there an element of, strong sensory input where they need headphones, they need noise cancelling headphones at all time, even in meetings? So it's really thinking about what does it mean for them, and a very tailored person approach on that.
Okay, thank you. The next question, it says, how do social difficulties differ between ADHD and autism? Why are they not accounted for in the diagnostic criteria for ADHD?
Because diagnostic criteria are usually they're highly medical. So we're looking at medical symptoms that can, some research studies include social difficulties. And actually, if you see a really well-experienced ADHD psychiatrist or psychologist that will do your diagnosis for interviews, they will ask social questions. Anyone that knows about ADHD will it's not part of the criteria, but they will ask, because we know how much it impacts them. Why they're not in the criteria, I don't think it tends to be anyway, but that's not a question I can answer. Whether they're similar or not with autism, some can be. I think there's so much overlap between autism and ADHD. And, when we think about sensory processing issues, emotional dysregulation, it doesn't matter if the emotional dysregulation and the responses to social situation is due to the autism or the ADHD, actually, because it's there. And it's very hard to unpack whether it's an ADHD problem or autism problem, because it doesn't work like that. It's a problem that you're having. And there will be a lot of overlap within those situations. And yeah, I don't think it's an easy thing to say, oh, well, he will struggle to be in groups or to go to social events because it's his autism rather than his ADHD. It doesn't really work like that.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, do you find some people refuse the diagnosis and refuse to believe or accept it?
Very small percentage, but it does happen, yeah. Some parents are not ready to hear it from their children. Some adults are not ready for it, even when so usually an adult not usually, an adult will seek their own diagnosis. So it is started by them. But yes, it does happen, a very small proportion, but it does happen. And it's usually due to the stigmas around the label of it. But yeah, but it's definitely not the norm.
Thank you. This question was in relation to one of the slides with percentages. So it says, if 70% is genetic, what is the cause for the other remaining 30%?
So there's been studies to show that there is a link with premature birth. What was the other? There's some sorry, I can't remember now. There's definitely a link with premature birth and the fact that the cerebellum develops at the last trimester. So if you're born too early, then it affects the way your executive functions work. Trauma, I think. Do you know what? I can't remember. I don't really believe there's much. I mean, this is not a scientific fact. It's my opinion. I don't really believe that there's much that ADHD comes unrelated to genetics, not from the family. I've never seen it. Some studies have shown it. So children born in trauma but is it ADHD or is it trauma? And I mean, anyway, I personally never seen it, and I've worked with hundreds of families and adults. Yeah. So I don't know how to answer this question because A, I haven't looked that much into it, and B, I'm not too sure. I have never seen it, and I don't really buy it. So is it one of those things, like when we're thinking about boys and girls, when we think ratio of 4:1, actually now that we know more with the science, we think it's a lot closer to 50-50 in childhood as well. It's just we haven't picked up on girls. Doesn't mean that girls don't have ADHD, it's just we haven't picked them up. And I think there's a history of research that have really focused about the environment, the impact of the environment on ADHD and how this can cause it. But I think this is changing. That's not the best answer, but that's all I have.
Thank you. So the next question is, I'm a parent to a young person with dyspraxia, and I think ADD. So the current system of diagnosis and communication with school is currently traumatic for families. Any advice on negotiating and dealing with all of these agencies without being impacted?
That's a big question. So this is the entire research I do with that I work with the care pathway with healthcare professionals, with schools, and I work locally with all the systems, and it is a mess. Not being impacted, no, you will always be impacted. It's a struggle. It will always be a struggle, and that's not a nice thing to say, but it's reality. It is very hard. It will carry on being very hard, even when it becomes easy in primary school. Let's say you move to secondary school and it's another battle. You will always have to advocate for your child. Now, one thing to remember is that schools do not need a diagnosis to put things in place. If they tell you that, then they're wrong. So you don't need to wait for an ADHD diagnosis or for whatever diagnosis to say, okay, he needs extra help with that. And that's one of the misconceptions and barrier that sometimes is unknown. Now, if you are in a school that says otherwise, then this is another fight you're going to have to fight. And yeah, it's I mean, both my children are on the pathway. I work with people on the pathway. I've studied everything. I've been in that field for 15 years, and I still struggle, and I am impacted by it. Even though I don't think, and this is not me being beheaded, but I don't think there's anyone in Nottinghamshire that knows the pathways better than me, that has the personal contacts that I have, that understands all the strategies, all the things that I can put in place for my children. And I'm still struggling. It does impact me because people don't listen. It's a complex system, and it's not nice. So I'm sorry, that's not the best answer, but I think remembering that you're the only person that can fight for your child, they can't do it from themselves, and every single thing you do, you're putting them in a better situation than someone else who doesn't. So, at least trying is the best thing you can do, understanding. And you know what, there's a lot of things you can put in place. There's a lot of things I put in place for my children. It's not ideal, it's not what I would want, it's not the best, but at least I know I'm doing my little bit, and so many things are in your control, not within the system, but within everything else that your child experiences.
Oh, thank you. The next question you mentioned in one of your slides, and it says, what is the reason for teeth issues, and asking what kind of problems this would be.
That's very interesting. I actually wasn't familiar with the teeth issues, but when we're thinking back of the symptomology of ADHD, so you think about a child or an adult actually who is very forgetful, so they will forget to brush their teeth. Then brushing your teeth is a very sensory inducing system. Lots of people don't like brushing your teeth, especially if you have sensory difficulties. Then if you're in the UK system, and this happened with lots of people I know, you not only forget to brush your teeth, but you forget your appointments. Now, if you forget your appointments, you're being discharged and you don't have a dentist anymore. Now, I've known, actually, my own ex-husband had to go in emergency with an abscess because he had been discharged because he kept forgetting and because he didn't have a dentist. And then there's a sensory issue of going to the dentist. I mean, nobody likes going to the dentist, but if you think when you have heightened senses and you're in that room and it smells very strong and there's very bright light and someone comes with their hands in your mouth, who wants to do that? I mean, not many people want to go to the dentist, but especially if all these things are heightened, it's an extremely uncomfortable place. So when you think about all these steps, you know, the forgetfulness, the brush your teeth, the forgetfulness for your appointment, the sensory difficulties of brushing your teeth, of going to the dentist, and you put it all together, and it is really, really high link with ADHD and autism on poor oral health. Yeah. I mean, I fight with my children every night to brush their teeth. And actually, I was just saying to Justin before that, he has a tooth abscess at 7 and has to go to the dentist in half an hour. So actually, this is because it's a fight. And unless I physically brush their teeth every day, it's just not something that, it's a difficulty at home.
Oh, thank you. I think we might have time for one more question, and then we've got quite a few that we're not going to get through. So I don't know whether you'd be happy.
Justine, I'm not in a rush. I don't have anything else afterwards. So I can stay back if people want to stay back, unless you guys have to go. I'm happy to, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. So the next question, it says, what factors would you recommend considering when planning physical activity sessions for people with ADHD or autism? For example, how to keep them engaged to ensure that they get the most out of the session? What sort of games and sports would you include?
I don't know about any specific games, but everything that is fast-paced, constantly changing, and quick rewards. So think when they can get laughs. So for example, running around a track for 20 minutes is not engaging for someone with ADHD, but you know, a game of basketball when there is quick, integrating quick rewards and incentives. So it's constantly, there's constant feedback, usually works very well. Now I'm not a PE teacher, so I don't know what kind of games would work best like that, but very fast paced. I mean, trampoline, or games that trigger your whole proprioceptions, that makes your whole body move. So trampoline, what they call when you do that, jumping jacks. So, you know, whole body movements have been shown time and time again to really engage the ADHD brain and calm it down. So my children go to the trampoline every night after school. So anything that just makes the whole body move.
Okay, thank you. The next question asks, how common is ADHD with people with dyslexia?
Oh, that was on the slide. I can't remember now. I think it's quite high, but I can tell you that very quickly by going on this slide. And it's between 15 to 25%.
Okay,
Oh, no,
thank
actually,
you.
dyslexia, sorry, no, it's much higher than that. So I'm looking at the wrong, I was looking at, it's between 25 and 45%.
Thank you. The next question says, I see OCD was mentioned as a comorbidity in children. Is it also prevalent in adults?
Yes. Yes. ODD is one of the only condition that tends to be more in children than in adults, and then we really see in
I think she's come back. I was going to say, I think we've just lost Blandine, but she's just come back.
I've just disappeared. Yeah, ODD tends to be really mainly in children. Tourette's also mainly in children, but OCD, yes, it's children and adults.
Thank you. The next question says, my teenage son has ADHD and struggles to make and sustain friendships. Is there any local support group for teens with ADHD?
So there is ADHD Solution, which is based in Lincoln or Leicester, can't remember now. Yes, that's the only one, and I don't know if they have a teens group actually. Not on top of my head. So I work a lot with the local, I mean, there are a lot of resources, but from the social aspect, not so much, and not so much for teenagers, unfortunately. No, I can't think of any. There is an adult ADHD group for adults, and there's a lot for children, but the teenage years are often missed.
I think some people have put some things in the chat actually, so that'd
good.
be worth looking at for people afterwards, because they'll be able to access the chat still. So
yeah, I just don't know whether is there ADHD specific. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, because people can access the chat. I think people are putting a few different bits in there, but yeah, thank you. What would be the best screening tool for ADHD, please?
So the ones I tend to use for adults, it's called the ASRS. And I don't know what it stands for, but those are freely available online. So the Connors is usually a tool that's being used a lot, but you have to pay for the Connors. And for children, what do I use? I can't remember the name. Sorry, I can tell you that very quickly because I I'm having a complete blank. I'll look it up quickly, and you can yes, you can ask me another questions while I think about it.
Okay, thank you. Do you know anything about the link between dementia and ADHD, please? I work in memory assessment services, and I'm seeing quite a few older adults that I believe might meet the criteria for ADHD, but they are undiagnosed. Thanks.
There is very little research on that, very little. So no, and it's a little bit the SNAP, sorry, just to go back, the SNAP, SNAP is the one that I use for children and adolescents. It's very tricky. So there's emerging research on dementia and ADHD, and emerging research on ADHD and menopause. And the reason I'm linking back to menopause is that a lot of the symptoms, menopausal symptoms and dementia symptoms, are very similar to ADHD symptoms. I mean, the forgetfulness, the irritability, now remembering things, now being very confused can be either. Can be, a lot of women experience that with the menopause, the emotion dysregulation, the forgetfulness. A lot of older people experience that with the dementia, and that's also meets the criteria for ADHD. So it's just unpacking what's what. But yeah, very little has been published, and I actually don't know. Well, I do know the link with menopause, but I don't know the links with dementia at all.
Thank you. So I think we've got two questions left. So the next one says, what are ADHD? Oh, I'm not sure if I'm reading this right. What are ADHD people so loud? ? I'm frequently told to shush.
So that's not science. That's not science. It's personal opinion. I think it's a mixture of impulsivity. You have to say this right here, right now, and usually when you have to say this right here, right now, you have to interrupt, or you have to make your voice heard. Therefore, you'll be louder. I think there's also a mixture of sensory processing. So my daughter is very loud, and I think she can't hear how loud she is, and she just it just doesn't. She doesn't realize there's a lack of understanding about, your behavior and your sound levels. And yeah, you mix that with impulsivity and excitement. Usually, again, this is not, but usually people with ADHD are very energetic. So when, you are a little bit more of everything, you move, you speak your hands, you are dynamic, and therefore your voice might be a lot higher as well. But those are not based on evidence, not on science. They're based on personal reflections and observations.
Thank you. And the last question, it says there's been increasing questions about whether ADHD is now being overdiagnosed, with lots of young people in particular seeking diagnoses. Do you have any thoughts about this? How do we
yes.
continue to respect the realities of the impact of ADHD at a time where the validity of diagnosis are being questioned?
So that's two different things. The validity of diagnosis is one thing, but the overdiagnosis is definitely not a thing. And that's one of the things that has been portrayed in the media. There is more diagnosis, and there has been a surge in diagnosis recently because of an increased awareness. Well, as one of the reasons. Just because there are more diagnoses doesn't mean that it's overdiagnosed. And this is a very important nuance. ADHD was underdiagnosed for many years, many years. So a study we did in 2018 showed that only 1% of children were receiving treatment. Now, if the prevalence is 3 to 5%, we're missing at best 2%. I've just published a paper that I've just submitted it this month. It should be published in the next couple of months, that show that on average, 25% of children who meet should meet diagnostic criteria for ADHD are being supported. So we're still way below what we should be in England. And adults is 12%. So 12% of people who would meet diagnostic criteria are being supported right now in England. So, okay, we're talking about treatment, but that shows the diagnosis. Even if another 30% are being diagnosed and don't want to be treated, we're still at 40%. Do you see what I mean? So we are way below the prevalence. We have not even met the prevalence, let alone overdiagnosis. So an increased diagnosis doesn't mean overdiagnosis. It just means that more people are aware, that a lot of people are getting their children supported, and then they realize that, oh, hang on, that sounds like me. Maybe I have it, and then go. So there's loads of factors that means that, the waiting lists are huge and the system is not great. But yeah, it's not overdiagnosed. And that's a fact. That's not, we have the data to back this up. It's actually still really highly underdiagnosed.
Oh, thank you, Blandine. That was all of the questions that you got through there. So thank you for staying on a bit to answer them, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise in this learning forum. It's been really valuable. So thank you for being part of this.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thanks to everyone for attending and your input with the questions, and for staying a bit longer at the end of the session as well.